So I recently modified a Nerf blaster into a coil gun. Take a look. Hey, what's up? Shyam here. It's been a long time since I uploaded a video. Sorry for that, I had my 10th grade final exams. And we recently hit the 10,000 subscribers milestone, and now we have more than 11,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for that. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and also hit the bell icon to get notified. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'll just begin by giving a brief explanation of how it works. Here we have the DC to DC converter, which converts 3 volts to 600 volts. The 3 volts is supplied by a battery pack of 2 AA batteries. On closing this switch, the capacitor starts to charge. I'm using two 400 volts 470 microfarads capacitors, while one of them is optional. If we close this switch, the total capacitance becomes 940 microfarads. The total energy contained by both of these capacitors at 400 volts is 75.2 joules. The energy contained by a capacitor is given by this equation. Now let's get to the most important part of this project, the coil, or the solenoid. To trigger the coil, it's as simple as flipping a switch and letting the current flow into the coil. I used a high voltage microswitch with high current rating. I know that an SCR or a thyristor is better and more efficient at transferring all the capacitor's energy into the coil, but I couldn't find any SCR here, so I had to use the switch, which seems to work quite okay. When the projectile is placed in front of the coil and the switch is closed, a magnetic field is created around the coil, and the projectile accelerates towards the coil. But as soon as it reaches the center of the coil, the capacitor is completely discharged, causing the magnetic field to collapse, and the projectile continues on its trajectory with the acquired momentum. I got the DC to DC converter from a disposable camera's flash circuit. I bought an Ilford disposable camera and took it apart to extract the PCB from it. But before doing that, I shorted the terminals of the capacitor soldered on the PCB. Speaking of PCBs, this video is sponsored by JLC PCB. JLC PCB is the largest PCB manufacturer in China who provides good quality PCBs at very low prices. I've used their services for many of my recent projects, and their PCBs never fail to satisfy me. To order a PCB, go to jlcpcb.com and then click on Quote Now. Here, upload your Gerber file and then click on Save to Cart. Then click on Checkout Securely to add your address, shipping, and payment method. Once that's done, hit Continue to place your order. Alright, now back to the project. I took the PCB and desoldered the capacitor, the flash, battery holder, and other unnecessary components. Then I marked the plus and minus signs near the solder pads, so that would be easier to solder the wires. Then I cut off the extending ends of the PCB and sanded off the rough edges to make it a perfect square. Then I started making the coil. For that, I used a straw as a barrel and glued 2 plastic washers on the straw 26 millimeters apart. Now that I had my spool, I started winding the enameled wire around the straw. I used a 24 gauge magnet wire, and the diameter of the straw is 5 millimeters. After every layer, I applied some super glue and I made a total of 10 layers. Then I cut the straw and sanded the ends of the wire to apply solder to it. When my coil was ready, I bought a Nerf Disruptor, and when I was about to unscrew it, I read this caution. I thought for about a minute, and then I was like, screw it, and started unscrewing it. I took the gun apart and removed all the parts except the trigger. I then took the gun's barrel and cleared the hole to fit the straw. I glued the coil to the barrel and the barrel to the gun. I cut the plastic out and cut a hole for the charging switch. Then I took the circuit board and glued it to the gun, and I soldered the switch to it. And then I did a bunch of other stuff, which I'm not gonna tell you, but I'm gonna show you. Keep watching. After my gun was ready, I started making the projectile. I took a nail of diameter 4 mm and cut off its head. Then I measured a length of 23 mm and cut it. I sharpened one side of the projectile and flattened out the other. I then took the projectile and put it inside the barrel. I turned the circuit on and charged the capacitor. Now, my capacitor was fully charged and ready to shoot. The results were pretty impressive for a single-stage coil gun without SCR. Now it was time to paint the gun. I sanded off the Nerf logo and definitely the warning. I took a can of matte black spray paint and applied 4 to 5 layers to it. I had covered the trigger and the switch with masking tape to prevent it from getting painted. I let the paint dry for about a day and done. The gun was ready. Now it was time to demolish some stuff. My first victim was a bulb. And now my favorite, a completely filled Pepsi can. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you later.